It is truly a gem. I mean, it's beautiful aesthetically. There are so many nuggets of history and so many stories that are going to be captured from the pieces and the people that have been inside this facility. It's just amazing.
Must have been a pretty important building because it's like the only building other than the courthouse in the city of Grand Marais. So it must have been an important place for people to bring things to get fixed. Obviously back then, blacksmithing and hand making things is what you had to do, you know. So I mean, it's a very historical, important piece of Grand Marais history, I think.
I just think it's fascinating to look back at our town and see how people used to live and work when we made our own stuff, when we made everything we needed here.
The blacksmith shop is a very important part of the community. As something broke, that's where you had to go to get fixed. And it's a very focal point of any community. The blades and the axes and all of that had to go to the blacksmith shop at the end of the day, as well as this area with the fishing industry and the logging and the iron, the ore mining. All of that needs repairs. Something's going to break, something's going to get dull.
When we find a treasure here like the Bally Blacksmith Shop, I think it's important that we save it, take care of it, and share the story and the history about it with the people who come here and the people who live here.
Here a few years back, Bill was getting pretty bad, and I knew I'd heard he was looking for somebody to clean up the scrap around here. Well, they never, ever hauled anything away or threw anything away. So Bill said, yeah, he said, you know, we pointed out back here to all this stuff. He said, that should go and that should go. Well, anyway, it ended up there was only a couple things there that he wanted to save. And I hauled 17 loads of scrap iron out of here.
I'm just so thrilled with what the Historical Society has done here. Their passion and their volunteers have just really brought this to life, and I'm excited for the next step.
I was extremely excited about this particular site because it is a one-of-a-kind gem, and I think it's absolutely a critical element of the fabric of this community, and the work that went on here has been instrumental in shaping the industries of this community, and to preserve it just seemed like a no-brainer. It's something that had to be done, and then the challenge is really what can it become?
The one-story, square-front, slightly painted structure looks like one of the Main Street buildings out of an Old West movie, complete with the old-style lettering. The ring of the hammer on the anvil is seldom heard around this shop anymore, but Albert Bally, the son of the founder, and now in his late 80s, agreed to come in to show us around and to do a little bit of work. Naked clear glass bulbs make a feeble effort to cast light on the smoke-darkened and dusty interior. Hanging from a crossbeam, a well-worn pulley of wood, minus its rope, and unused for years, now just a fixture. In every space possible, the floor, the corners, the walls, and the ceilings, there are the tools and scraps of metal from long-forgotten jobs. A mixed assortment of clamps and pinch bars, mallets and rods, chains, tongs, hammers, metal shears, and a host of other objects defying description adorn the place. Most of it now covered with dust and grime, but all of it very fascinating. In the midst of it all, Bally stood and talked to us about his more than 6 decades of fixing and making things of metal. You've got kind of a living museum here representing, well, both the logging era and the heyday of fishing. So many of these tools I'm not familiar with, and maybe you can explain what types of things you worked on. What is this, for example?
Well, that's for handling pulpwood, like in the snow. Instead of digging down in the snow to get hold of a stick, you just take and hook it that way, and they close on putting any size stick from that big up to that big.
So if they
load them on a dray and haul them in with a horse.
A lot of the lumber camps had their own blacksmiths, but I suppose those who didn't or needed something maybe quite quickly, they'd come in and see you?
Any camp of any size had their own blacksmith, and they didn't sleep with the ordinary people. They slept in the office.
I see. They were something
the cooks
special.
And the blacksmiths and the clerk, they were a little bit...
little better than the others.
Yeah, they got more money.
Ah. What about this thing? There's a hook on the end of here. How did they use this?
Well, they went on the back end of a sleigh runner, and going uphill, it'd ordinarily be flopped up this way. So it wouldn't be dragging, but if they're going uphill and wanted to rest their horses, they'd flop it down, and this would dig into the ground or ice and hold the sled, so the horses didn't have to hold it.
Did you work on things like this yourself?
Yes.
Did you make them from scratch?
Yes, we made a lot of stuff like that.
These weren't manufactured at all. They made them themselves, or you would. The lumberjacks worked with a variety of hand tools. The peavies for rolling the big logs, pike poles to shove the logs around in the river or in the mill ponds, and a third implement that Bally turned out by the hundreds. These tools I'm a little more familiar with. One of the most popular was this pickaroon, and I can see that it was probably made here, huh?
That's right.
And this was used to pull logs along? Was that the idea?
Well, mostly pulpwood, and a lot of them today are getting them for firewood. It's handy if you want to pull a stick out of the snow or just pick it up and pull it over to you.
Those were also, at times in fights, used as a pretty effective weapon. That'd go pretty well into the skull, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but the idea, there's a lot of different kinds of points.
Yeah, and that one has a beak on it, more or less. It curves down.
This is more or less for frozen wood. You take an ordinary hook and stick it into a frozen stick of pulpwood. It doesn't stick. It's just like putting it in a cake of ice. It'll just slide right out. But this one sort of punches the whole end of the stick, and then it's that thing.
Sure, then that holds on. Despite his 87 years, Albert Bally demonstrated that he still knows how to beat the hot metal into a sharp point to make a pickaroon. He still has the energy, but he said that his 87-year-old eyes are not what they used to be. His robust health, and in fact life itself, was in jeopardy when he was a frontline soldier in World War I. His experience in the trenches in France, where so many of his buddies died, left him with strong anti-war feelings that he freely expresses today. What about this mean-looking thing here? This is both a combination axe and pickaroon. Is that the idea?
That's right. Well, in the old days, a lot of the lumberjacks or pulpwood savages, they wanted an axe and a pickaroon. They're working in the woods, they can knock the limbs off, and then they wanted to pull it out, they'd hook it with that.
But it's kind of a dangerous tool.
Well, they were outlawed over in the state of Michigan, I guess, at one time. They said they were anyway.
Auto repair had been a big business for Bally, especially when the sometimes nearly impassable dirt roads took a heavy toll on the wheels of the cars and wagons. And this is when he raised the forge higher, so that the bent spokes and rims could be heated and straightened. Vestiges of that era still hang from the ceiling.
We call them wagon tires. They were the biggest ones, I think, were about 1/2 inch thick and 5 inches wide and maybe that high. Used them on tote wagons hauling supplies into the camps.
Oh, yeah.
4 or 6 horses on the wagons.
It would seem to me with the fire coming out of here that we saw a little earlier that the flames would threaten to set your building on fire, but this building's been standing obviously a lot of years.
Oh yeah, it's a fire hazard. That's what the village fathers told him when he wanted to fix it up. They wanted to get rid of all these old frame buildings. They're fire hazards. It's about the only one in town that hasn't burnt down.
Bally remembers well one emergency repair job that tested his skill and speed. It seems that an ore boat adrift in Lake Superior off Grand Marais needed a special part for its rudder. So he fashioned the metal part very rapidly, and the ore boat was soon on its way without delay or damage. Customers didn't want to wait for the parts to be shipped in weeks after ordered, so Bally often had to make them in his shop. Among other things, he melted down the soft metal called babbitt to make the bearings for the connecting rods in Model T Fords and other cars.
Being right here on the waterfront, you obviously had to make things for the fishermen.
That's right.
This one sort of falling apart, but
Yeah.
what is this? What would have been its
Well,
its
it's
use?
sort of a fish scoop for scooping. When the herring chokers go out, they just chuck the fish out of the net and throw them in the boat. And when they get into the dock, the boat is full of fish, and they want to get them out, so instead of picking them up with their hands, they take a scoop like this. This one wasn't quite finished, I guess. There's no holes in here for the mesh. Yeah, that one started but never finished.
Being a blacksmith is a very demanding job. Bally put in many grueling hours at his forge and on the anvil. The pay was not always that great, and yet he said it really wasn't all that bad.
But in those days, if you earned a penny, you could do what you wanted with it.
He had the pleasure of being in business before the government began the income tax. And now, if plans proceed successfully, Bally's ancient shop will be around for many years, even after he's gone.